second on the started? No. Are you sure? Okay. Good evening. I'd like to call the meeting to order at 6:03. If everyone would please join me in the pledge. The pledge of allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And if we get a roll call, please.
Mrs. Carey,
Present.
Mr. Pascal.
Excuse for a moment.
Mr. Jackson.
Here.
Mrs. Dion. Here. Mr. Annaly.
Excused.
Mrs. Snyder.
Present.
And Mrs. Gillett.
Excused. Sorry, I keep forgetting. We have esteemed guests with us this evening, and Ms. O'Shea, would you like to do the introductions?
Certainly. So first of all, as always, if you have submissions for public comment, they can be emailed to voecomment@cohoes.org. And tonight, we are very happy to have Mayor Keeler joining us, as well as Teresa Bourgeois, Director of Operations for the Cohoes City School District. And they're going to talk about a few projects, two which we did write a letter of support for. The Cohoes Floating Solar Project and the New York State Office of Parks and Recreation Historic Preservation Grant for the area Canal, Parkway, and Heritage Trail. So thank you for joining us, and we're going to turn it over to you.
Sure, okay, thank you for the invitation tonight. Thank you for having us. And this is my first appearance before the new board, so congratulations to the new members. Thank you all for serving. Early on in the administration, we launched an initiative called Cleaner, Greener Cohoes. And effectively, we are taking a comprehensive approach to creating a more environmentally sustainable city. So from buildings to street lighting to recycling to green spaces, every aspect of how people live, work, and play in Cohoes is being considered as we map a cleaner future for our community. A couple quick examples, recycling. So everybody's familiar with the little blue recycling bins. They're okay, they break easily. People either overload them, which causes litter problems, plastics and papers, or they don't use them as much as they should, and folks just end up putting the recyclables in with the regular trash. And that's also not great, because we just recently renegotiated a contract for recycling where for a previous number of years, recycling, we had actually been paying higher than for regular trash when it comes to the tipping fee. So now we're down to like, I think a fraction, like a third. The recycling is about a third of the cost of the regular trash. So we are in the process of ordering about 4,500 new trash recyclables, 65 gallons, so it's probably 3-4 times as big as the blues. And that's great because folks can put all the recyclables in there. We can recycle them, it's cheaper, and we've got lids on containers, so you should not have the litter problem. And at some point in the future, I'd like to talk about recycling more with the school district. But also street lighting. This fall, we'll be replacing the almost 1,600 street lights with LED bulbs that over a period of 20 years should save taxpayers about $9 million. So that'll be underway shortly. And then the municipally owned buildings, City Hall, the Music Hall, the library, for example, where there's issues not with just a roof leak, which we're working on. We have been working on fixing those things, but also we want to take some of the money that we're saving with the LED streetlight conversion and put that into the the municipally owned buildings so we can replace the windows, many of which are original in the 1895 City Hall building. So that will also generate some energy efficiency and some money savings so we can upgrade and modernize the air conditioning and heating. So those are just some of the examples, but we're here tonight to talk about two of the more important cleaner, greener Cohoes initiatives that we would like the school district to consider partnering with us on. And the first is the floating solar project. So we set a goal of generating 100% renewable energy for our government buildings. And we're all Cohoes residents. Cohoes is 4 square miles. There's not a lot of open green space. What thinking outside the box, what we do have is we have a 10-acre reservoir that we plan on putting about 8,000 solar panels on the water. It'll take up about 2/3 of the water space, and that will generate all the electricity that we need to power our municipal buildings. So it'll save energy, it'll save money, and the city will end up using about 60% of the energy that's generated. So we want to propose that we work to make the remaining 40% available to the Cohoes City School District and the Cohoes Housing Authority. Ideally, I'd like to see a split of 30%, 30 going to the school district, 10% to the housing authority. That way we can get the broadest community benefit for the project. And there's also a tremendous educational opportunity think about from kindergarten right on to college. And we can talk more about that as we go forward. But we'd like to work with the Board of Education, the superintendent, the principals, the teachers, and anybody else that potentially has a stake in the project. So with that, I would like to introduce the Director of Operations for the City of Cohoes, Teresa Bourgeois. Did I miss anything?
No.
No?
That's perfect. I'll stand only because the poster isn't from me. Just a little bit more, we'll talk about floating solar in terms of a potential partnership with the school district, and we've had some very preliminary conversations, and that's been very, very helpful. This floating solar is not new. It's not a new technology, but it's relatively new to the United States, and the project we're proposing, which is municipally owned, that the city will own and operate it, that is, as far as we know, a novel project in the country, that no one else in the country is doing that. And so we become a national demonstration project. And as the mayor said, that we would like to partner with the schools on an education component, developing a curriculum and such. And we've been talking with local and national funders, because this would be not only important for the school district, but just so you understand the curriculum, the materials we develop, they would become part of the national model. And in fact, I was on a call, my colleague and I, yesterday with the U.S. Department of Energy affiliated group talking about this. And one of the things that they're very interested in is the education component. So the details of how that will work, we're in the preliminary stages, but the education materials, the curriculum materials, and also there's a tremendous interest in workforce development, in how to go, develop skills building, how to create pathways into community colleges, other places, because there's a lot of opportunity here. The other area that's a lot more complicated, and because it's novel, we don't really have a pathway yet, as the mayor mentioned, is the partnering to make use of this 40% that we will not use. And so, again, in talking with these national experts, they don't know yet the mechanics of how that would happen, but if once there is an agreement with the school board and the school district that we want that to happen, because this has not been done before, we would then begin talking with experts about how to do that. So those are the two pathways. They're new because this is a national model, but we'd really like to continue conversations and work with you folks on how to create these new paths that others would follow. There'd be both the physical platform at the floating solar location, And then it'd also be a virtual platform, it'll be an online platform. So, on that, so the other project is the Cohoes Canal Parkway and Heritage Trail. We hope to have, I gave you each a picture, oh, I'm sorry, on floating solar. This is the basic one-page fact sheet. And also, I provided a press release.
I'm sorry, Stacy, could you just pass those around?
I'm
Just
sorry.
take one and pass it around.
The all important question is how you pay for this. It's a $6 million project. We have $3 million targeted toward it at the federal level. And we're working to get another $1 to $2 million in federal funding, and then the remainder would be state funding and foundation funding, which we're applying. So the other project that we just, Erie Canal, everybody knows the history of the Erie Canal through the hose, but look, a lot of people don't realize that a lot of the canal still exists, and pieces of it are visible, a lot of it is hidden, and the hose has 10 locks, or some people call them flights through the hose. That's more than any other city in the state. In many other cases, these canals that are operating and no longer operating have been turned into educational, heritage trail sites, tourism destinations. And there's been efforts over the years, since the 1970s, to do that in Cohoes. But right now, it's an area that's in need of restoration, revitalization, and a refocus. And we just applied for funding from the State Office of Parks, Recreation, and Historic Preservation. We appreciate a very strong support letter for that. But to get planning and design money to figure out how best to redesign this area, it's basically, as the mayor talked about, we have 3 green arteries through our city, north to south. We have the bike trail, the Mohawk Country Bike Trail. We have the Delaware Avenue corridor, the historic corridor on Van Dyke Island, and then we have yet to be developed the Cohoes Canal Parkway. And one of the things we've talked about is it might be possible, for instance, for the schools at different grade levels to adopt a lot. So, and just, early conversations, so kindergarten, first and second grade would be lock 9, third and fourth would be lock 10, so lock 11, fifth graders, lock 12, sixth graders, on and on. And by the time you're in 12th grade, your lock is lock 18, which is right by the Cohoes Falls. And so it becomes traditional events that happen there. Some are education events, some are recreational, festivals, those kinds of things. But we've had some preliminary conversations, but again, we'd like to talk more about that. So if and when we get this planning money, we would very much like the school board and the school district to be a part of this planning and design, so that the curriculum components, and again, this would be a model that others could use, but the curriculum components and the activities would be built into our planning of what it ultimately is going to look like when we revitalize it.
So Teresa and I have had initial discussions and also some initial discussions with principals and teacher leaders. There are just so many cross-curricular connections that can be made throughout all of these. Plus, as we talked about, especially with the floating solar project, opportunities for students to really learn about so many areas in different career opportunities. So there's many components. So we're excited.
It's very exciting.
Do people have questions about the project, either of the projects? Any detail? Have you seen how cool it is to have the solar floating on the water? In Asia, they do this all the time. Here, not so much.
So that would go right over the reservoir?
Yeah, it's literally, they float. These are the solar arrays, and they are on floats, and they float on the water. And you can walk, not on the arrays, obviously, but the little connectors in between where you can walk on them, only if you're there to repair them.
Walk on water.
Yeah, you can walk on water. And these are the National Renewable Energy Lab, the people we've been talking with, put out a report in 2018 that says that there are about 24,000 human-made water reservoirs around the country that are suitable for floating solar, and if those were all capped, it would generate 10% of all the country's electricity needs. There are 492 of these in New York alone. And think about it, I mean, if we are able to do this, we're generating all of the municipal power, or electricity. And So our costs would go down to zero, and then that money can be reinvested back in the city. And same thing with the school district to the extent that we can partner in the housing authority. But yeah, and it's a tremendous education tool. We anticipate that there'll be researchers at all levels from K to college who want to research with us on this and learn about it.
Couple side benefits, by covering 2/3 of the reservoir surface with the panels, it's doing two things. It's reducing the evaporation, so we're having to pump less up, and it's also, it naturally keeps the sunlight from going in, so we have to apply less herbicide to the surface water.
Are there any drawbacks at all?
Cost.
No, it's an expensive project, but like you said, it's a $6 million project roughly. We've already secured half of that from the House of Representatives. We hope to get additional federal money and some state money. I mean, if we secure all that, right now, we might have put in $20,000 of city money to get it to where it is right now, but everything else should be federal or state money, so no, there's no drawbacks that I see as long as things go to plan.
And I think from the collaboration between the school and the city is just so, it's such a big deal. And it's the direction we'd like to go in. We're gonna spend some time tonight talking about career education. And we want to break out of the academic bubble and have our kids see the application of the academics that they do here. And I think the more partnership, the more cooperation, communication, and our students go out and they realize they're part of the community. And I just think it's really exciting stuff.
So I think every administration comes in with their own motto. I came in, it was the 150th anniversary, so ours is a little longer than most. But it's honor the past, explore the present, and inspire the future. And between these two projects, we cover all three of those. And Mark, I didn't notice when you came in, but you're talking about the breakdown, the 60% of the 60, 30, 10. So there is something there for the housing authority as
Yep,
well.
and there's an interest there for
Yeah.
sure.
And I think if you look at the federal level, the infrastructure bill just passed the Senate, it still has to work through the House. But also their appropriations bills going through the House and the Senate, and there's one, it's called the Energy Water Bill, sorry, too much detail, but that has an enormous amount of new funding for workforce development in the clean energy field. And so this kind of project, because we're a national model, considered a national model, if we work with you collaboratively, that kind of thing would be right for funding. And there is new money, there's a tremendous focus at the state level and the federal level on moving in this direction. And so we want to work together, creating these curriculum models, creating these STEM education models, so on and so forth. And I tell you, there's two different funders that we've been talking with, potential funders, in the last 3 weeks, and they both are very interested in funding us with the idea of our education curriculum, school to workforce component with those projects.
I had the opportunity to participate in a preliminary call, and I know we talked about potentially building a teaching pavilion down at the site. Some college, high school, middle school, elementary classes could be held there. But also, I hope, maybe we could think about having Tesla put in some car charging stations for e-cars and also e-bikes along the trail, and we can use that very energy to do that. That might be a nice way to tie it all together.
Well, that's an interesting addition, yes. We definitely, part of our plan and discussion is outside of the 5.9 million, but we're creating a separate funding track for that, is to have this, both a virtual and a physical education platform. And I like the idea of the charging station.
I think one other thing we talked about that forgot to mention is, especially in the adopting a lock model, some of the character education opportunities, so responsibility, respect. So we talked about that too, a whole nother thing.
Service, so there's a
Service, yeah.
service, cleaning up, keeping cleaning, to create some sense of ownership and some civic pride, and pride in our heritage. And as the mayor says, honor the past, explore the present, inspire the future. there's so many learning opportunities for the locks, if you just look at them, how they're designed, how they're engineered, what they did, and how you can learn from that, and, hydropower was the first, an earlier clean energy, right, so. I don't wanna go on too long. Other questions?
No, but the community becomes the classroom.
Yes.
And
Yes.
I just think it's terrific.
Well, not to belabor, but separately, we are in conversation, there's a building downtown, the old Cohoes Savings Bank, and there's an innovator entrepreneur who owns that building, and we're in conversations with him about creating a clean energy accelerator there, when in fact, Cohoes essentially would be a living laboratory because of all the things we have going on here. Of how to take a historic city with historic buildings and convert them, how to replicate this kind of floating solar project elsewhere, both on the education side and the technology side.
Well, thank you
Fantastic.
so
Thank
you so
much.
much.
And,
Thank you all.
and thank you for
Appreciate the
sharing.
invitation.
And
Thank you
Definitely
for your,
looking forward to more conversations about this.
thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. We'll pick up our, yeah, I'll just wait for the end of the big one.
Thank you.
Thank you.
if you don't want to stay, we could also drop them off. It's up to you. We're very exciting, but.
Not always.
I want to hear the report now.
So some updates from my end. As you know, during the school year, we hosted some vaccination clinics. This next one for ages 12 and up on August 16th and September 10th in the Cohoes Middle School Gymnasium from 9 to 10:30. There is an electronic reservation form on our website. We also sent Parents Square notices out. Thank you to Mr. Martinelli for arranging all of this, and thank you to John McDonald of Mayor's Pharmacy. So I just wanted to make sure that I mentioned that as well. Any questions on this? And then I have a few updates. I'm just going to start in the middle, go up and down. So just so you know, at our next board meeting, we're going to have the Capital Area Boys and Girls Club here. They are our partners in our UPK grant. We'll be going over our UPK plan and our UPK contract at that point. We did just submit our UPK report. It was approved, and our UPK grant application submitted it early. So they'll be here, and then we'll also be talking about the Abram Lansing School Improvement Plan at the next meeting, and we'll make sure that you get the 21-22 plan, as well as an outline of results from the 2021 plan in advance of the meeting. So just some reopening committee updates. We did meet as a committee last week, and we have another meeting on Monday. So originally we were waiting for New York State Department of Health guidance, and then we were told last week that there would not be any statewide guidance. So the capital area districts have been developing common matrices with some uniqueness across districts for criteria when we are in low, moderate, substantial, and high transmission areas. And we'll be sharing a draft plan in the near future. Then just yesterday, we did hear that the state education department will be sending out guidance now. Guidance, not regulations, but all of this guidance is based on CDC recommendations and American Pediatric Association recommendations. So I'll share more after our next reopening committee, and then at that point in time, we'll also have some parent meetings. But I did want to let you know that we were working through, despite some uncertainty at times and some changes. So, and then, as you know, Stacy's going to be talking about our progress a little later. Our American Rescue Plan funding plan will be submitted to the state, and one role in that plan is a career readiness or education coordinator. And so I just wanted, and Mr. Pascal, I know this is near and dear to your heart, and so we thought this might be a good point in time to have the discussion. So this grant funding is for 3 years. So at this point in time, we're looking at a 3-year position funded through the grant. I did share, it's a draft. I have copies if anybody wants that, but just for some starting points, a draft position statement, and we are looking at this as potentially being, and that's open to discussion too, a teacher on special assignment or a counselor on special assignment. What that would allow us to do is for the 3 years of the grant to, if we had the interest, to have a current teacher or counselor receive training and but already be familiar and potentially
Will be full-time.
it would be a full-time, and then that way, it would be a full-time additional stipend on top of their current salary, and then we would be able to hire a replacement teacher or counselor for 3 years. We would make sure that that person knew they were being hired for the period of the grant. That's one way we could potentially look at it. I think Stacy and I spoke, and I think that could be a good use of the funding, and also a lot of the heavy work, and this is an ongoing need, but in the beginning years, that's where a lot of the initial work in terms of really looking at the curriculum, meeting with staff, can be done, and then that way 3 years from now, we would be able to examine. And some key pieces, making sure they're, helping to develop and implement a career readiness plan with infusing career exploration into the curriculum. Really looking at how are we going to coordinate data collection, not only to track student readiness and their career plans with us, but how are our students doing after post-high school. Maintaining partnerships, so that there's a variety of areas. So I'd like to open it up for discussion and some key components.
I thought the draft was very well done, very comprehensive, covered most of all bases. I listened to tonight's presentation from City Hall, and once we can establish structurally and routinely those kind of communications, and then our students benefit from that. I'd like to include with this a career education committee that would include not just school people, and very, very importantly, the public sector, private sector. We would recruit Teresa to get on a committee like this and have that structural built-in communication with the public sector, and there's some people that I've talked to so many people about this that want to help, that would be willing to help and make themselves available as speakers, but provide us that connection, that ongoing connection. So I'd ask that the board consider a career education committee that it would help. There's so much involved with this initiative. It's comprehensive, it's big, and a working committee that could help this person. It could be their contacts and help bring this information in. But I thought whoever put together the draft
We
covered.
borrowed it from multiple places, but this is ours.
It covered a lot of ground, a lot of very important ground.
So one piece, and we talked about professional development in here as well. I think it's important to also provide opportunities for our teachers, our counselors to, so for example, on the professional development day, to be able to explore some workplaces outside of school to see what some of those career connections can be. So that was another component. We had some discussions, and some districts have been doing that for certain professional development days.
But
Did that-
it's interesting that the mayor and Teresa were trying, just that itself, think about the opportunities for our students to learn about the solar panel as the whole country, the whole world needs to go green. But also look back at Erie Canal and from an engineering perspective, that it's exciting stuff. And I think just such valuable experience for our students who can bring.
So would you be, and I think the idea of the Career Education Committee is fantastic. And I do know one board member who definitely be a member. So are you,
Very busy.
are you looking at that from a board level committee or from more of a district level committee with certain representatives of the board?
Certainly board representation, and if it's not me, I'm gonna choke somebody.
I'm sorry.
Are we voting?
But I think very importantly that we have connections beyond the school.
So at this point in time, it could be a district level committee with some very select board members. Anybody's welcome, but we will make sure there's a spot.
We want somebody right from central
Yeah,
office.
yeah.
And someone instructional.
Teachers
It's
and-
like very important to
Community.
reach out beyond the school. Really want children.
And you can stay.
And I know there was some discussion in terms of career readiness / education. We don't want to slash, so.
I just make, and I'm gonna try to be quiet, but I just think there's a distinction between career readiness implies that the students are gonna work across the stage and be ready to, and that's not our expectation. Our expectation is they work across the stage with a plan, a thoughtful plan that was the culmination of a whole lot of engagement throughout their whole career, that they have a purpose and a plan. And to get there, you need career education. So I just think career education is better fit than career readiness. We're not gonna have engineers graduate and run an engineer, and they're a specialist with solar.
But we want them to graduate knowing that that's the
Knowing
path,
how-
that that's
What they
the-
need to do to get there.
Exactly.
Yes, so I think career education to me is better.
I agree with that. There's just one thing that sticks out for me, just as you're developing this. Just from my perspective, knowing that this is the 3-year funding window, there's too much coordinates and collaborates, which, don't get me wrong, incredibly important thing. But when we're looking at a shorter term window, at least initially, I want to see more of the developing systems, creating structure, so that we're able to continue on with things. Versus sometimes when we get into coordinate and collaborate, it's a forever thing.
Well, it almost needs to be. So we need to have a heavy
But-
lift in the first 3 years,
Yes,
so we
that
have
is my-
full funding.
Right.
And then we can look at, maybe a stipend to
Once we
continue
build-
on.
build-
trade.
Yeah,
So
because that's the
that's it.
heavy lift is
So-
up front, so that's why I'm saying I'd
Right.
like to see a little more of.
You want this to
Between the wording.
reflect more
So-
the first.
Yeah. So as we move to the final version, we can look at the verbiage. Some pieces where it was collaborated because in many places, so for example, at the elementary, it's really looking at those current curricular pieces and seeing where best to infuse and working with teachers and
Oh, no,
and
absolutely, but
principals. So, but we
to
will.
me, part of developing systems is collaborating with all the stakeholders, getting all the input, understanding, everybody's needs, and then develop a plan that meets.
And I think it creates a culture shift where we're thinking beyond school, beyond test preparation, beyond, and then we have a lot of pressures from the state and federal government. There's things we have to do, we don't have to do, we don't have to get done. But we bring in the notion of purpose. Why are we doing all these things? Why are we, well, this is the end result, that this is what we want to be the culmination.
So we will, I'll revise the draft and share, and then the next question will be, Stacy posting and reporting from it. So,
I like that approach though. I think you'd find people that would really be into something like this, be excited about it.
I agree, and then some of, and then already having some knowledge of either the curriculum or the counseling program, then be able to take.
It's a nice head start.
So now, Stacy Matthew for our business update.
So the conversation continues about the American Rescue Plan. Right after we met the last time, New York State issued a new memo, and application became available, so it's July 21st. It's not the complete application, it's the federal share, it's the bulk of the money. They call it the 90% base, the elementary and secondary school emergency relief fund, so it's referred to as ESSER. So that's about 4.4 million for us. So the application is available, we've been working on it. It's going to approve additional approvals that they don't normally call for. So the school business official actually approves it, and the president of the Board of Education has to approve it. So that's new. I've not seen that before. But there will be several narratives. There will be the normal FS10, which is basically the budget for the grant. And again, it's the bulk of the money. It's 4.4 million for us. As far as other financial updates, we have our auditors, Marvin and Company. They'll be here next week. They'll be performing their on-site field work. They're usually here for the full week, and then there's usually some back and forth in the next coming weeks to tidy things up, and then we'll have a draft in September. So deadline is October 15th to have that process wrapped up, and after the financial statements are issued, we'll talk about our favorite long-range plan and the reserves plan and all that fun stuff in November. So we have a save the date for the audit committee meeting, and that'll be October 5th at 5 o'clock. And we'll meet with Marvin Company, they'll do their presentation, we'll have the financials, and then we'll have Michael Wolf, who'll go over the annual risk assessment, and we'll have John Domel, who's our internal claims auditor, so he'll go over his process as well. Other reporting deadlines that we have the usual state reports, so the ST3s, that's really the state version of the financial statements, and I use the financial statements in conjunction with our database finance manager and visions to basically reconcile everything and report it the way that the state wants to see the information. And there's also attendance forms that are required and a calendar to make sure that we meet our hourly and our days requirement as far as the kids being in school. There's also buildings and grounds and transportation forms that are due. So that's September 2nd. And then we have the Division of Budget Transparency Reporting, and that is due September 3rd. And that is similar to the reporting that we do in January. Only this report goes to the Department of Budget, and instead of actual information, it's budgeted information. So it's the 21-22 budgeted information, and it has to include the 21-22 planned expenses for ARP and Carissa. So ARP is due the 31st, and then we're reporting it in the third, in the certain buckets that they wanted. So it's a little tight, but we'll get through it. An update on tax collection. We actually had an update to our assessment file. So the tax rate that I talked about a couple times, I think 2 meetings ago, it's changed slightly. It's still good news. It's still less than what we had estimated. It's just different. So it's 37.85, and we had budgeted 37.91. So again, it's still good news. It's still less than we estimated. It's just different than I had reported. So I just wanted to make you aware. We already updated the website, so it's reflected on the website. We also are preparing for the first installment of tax collection, so that begins December 1st. And I just wanted to make you aware we use BOCES for our tax collection process. And they're going to be implementing a new system, a new software system next year. But this year, they're running the system parallel, so we're not gonna see any differences this year. But that is something that's up and coming, and again, they're running a parallel system, so hopefully they work out any kinks before we implement that next year, but that's something that's in the works, so just want to make you aware of it. Do you have any questions for me?
I just want everybody to know, Stacy made it sound like, oh, we have this report and that report. No, these are lock yourself in your office and don't talk to anybody for 3 days reports, every one of them. So thank you, because it's a tremendous amount of work that goes into everything that you mentioned.
Thank you. I may or may not get hives.
We would like an update on that.
Yeah. Yeah, right.
Thank you.
All set? Does anybody have any questions for Mr. Shea, Ms. Mackey? No? Great. Mr. Jett?
How are we doing on remaining classroom instructional openings?
Yeah, so, we still have a middle school science teacher and a middle school special education teacher opening, but we're getting very close with that, and so hopefully by Friday. And then, a math teacher is needed at the middle school, and that we're in process, or beginning the process. I'm sorry, high school, sorry. A high school.
They looked
math
impressively
teacher.
confused.
So we've reopened that search,
Alright,
and
so just those 3 elementaries are full?
so the elementaries, the posting closed last week. There were over 80 applicants that are being screened.
Wow.
And so then first round interviews are starting next week. And just so everyone knows our process, we have first round committee interviews, and then we narrow it down. Our second round is a lesson plan interview where we send the candidates standards, grade level, scenario, and they take a committee, and in that case, it's the 3 elementary principals and the assistant director of special programs through a lesson, and then there is the final round, which is with me. So that's starting next week. But the interviews will be early that week, lesson around later that week, so that we can have them appointed for the 25th. And then after that, we'll be looking for the academic intervention grant-funded positions. So that's where we stand. And we, our postings just closed for our 8 positions, and our remaining TA position closes tomorrow, and then we'll be better. So we could be better, but we could be way worse. So, but we'll be there by the start.
All right. Building readiness as far as HVAC, windows, screens, is Jim feeling good? Is Jim seem to be white knuckling?
There's a couple of buildings that are of concern. We had a walkthrough last week of July. High school was behind schedule. So there was a walkthrough that was conducted, some follow-up, so hopefully they'll be on task. And then implementing is always a challenge because there's so many programs in the summer. So those are our 2 buildings that I think he feels better about the high school now. He's on vacation this week, but I think he would say he feels better about the high school now. So we'll cross our fingers for that.
Okay. And then how are we looking for tech heading into the fall? Any supply chain issues popping up again?
Nothing that I've heard yet. The 5th grade and 9th grade cohort student Chromebooks have already been ordered. I haven't heard that there's a delay, but I also haven't gotten a timeline on delivery yet. The staff ones that we ordered for the remaining staff that we had purchased this past spring, those should be in supposedly by the end of this month. And then as far as the rest of the technology, it's just shuffling some of the stuff we purchased last year between cohorts. And then continuing on with putting the buildings back together. But again, that's dependent on the custodial staff.
So you have a nice slow week, the week before school starts?
Oh, yeah. It's been slow the entire summer.
So since Sylvie's here, and Sylvie's not gonna be with us at the next board meeting, just so you know, so the plan with so our 3, 4, and 5 are one-to-one with Chromebooks. So the fifth graders are carrying their Chromebooks on to the middle school with them, so they'll go 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th, because that's the 4-year span. And then, so our current 5th graders will be getting the new Chromebook so that we can continue that 4-year cycle.
Right.
And then the 4-year cycle begins again at
Nice.
9th grade. So this coming year, 9th, 10th, and 12th will be one-on-one, but there's enough Chromebooks in carts for 11th grade at the high school. So even though they're not specifically assigned one-on-one, we should be all set. So we're in a much better place than we were. And that will help us each year. And then by the time the students are seniors, they'll be able to take those Chromebooks with them from 9th grade, because that's near. They're still useful, but it's the
Right.
end of life.
Yep.
I think we emailed the information, but while I was on vacation, we received the Smart School funding for the cameras that we
Yes.
purchased 2 summers ago. So that was very, very good news.
I like the emails where we receive cameras.
Yeah.
And then Carissa approval, right? And I
Yeah.
do have to publicly apologize to Sylvie. He had a key spot on our reopening committee agenda, and I forgot. So that's why we get to talk to him tonight, so.
And then the last one's not a question as much as a comment, just obviously, this is a happy place for me as far as science, technology, engineering. As we head in this direction, I think we need to continue to look at our high school electives and how we can manage to have things that line up with these fields.
Thank you.
No.
Are you sure?
You can't possibly.
That was a full year's worth of comments.
There's no way. You're missing Margaret, I think.
She told me to take it.
I knew it. I knew it was a conspiracy. I knew it.
Does anyone else on board have any questions about the presentation or the agenda? Anyone in the audience from the community have any questions about the presentation or the agenda? No? Okay. We will move on to old business. So during the reorg meeting, we tabled the future meeting dates to try and, to have a discussion about maximizing attendance. Stacy and Peggy were able to come up with a list of dates that could be changed and couldn't be changed. And I'd like to share this with you guys and ask that everybody take it home and consider it against your own calendars, and then table it again, and then have, a discussion and a vote next meeting about potentially changing the meeting dates to maximize attendance.
So just one thing, if our dates for our district calendar hard copy
Oh, yeah, I forgot that.
are
Sorry.
due. So if you're okay not putting it on the hard copy district calendar, it still will be on the website, and notification will be given in advance. If you're fine with that, we can definitely move this to the next meeting.
Anybody have any issue with it not being on the printed calendar, but still being on the electronic calendar?
And
I'm good. Once I get them, I just put them in my phone. And I seem to get a few emails before each meeting.
Right. It's still publicly posted, it's still on the electronic calendar, it's still right in all of the parent.
Thank you. Mrs. Rumsey, did you write that down? Thanks.
All right. So if we could get a motion to designate consent agenda, that the board adopts the following resolutions of the August 11th, 2021 business agenda. Item 6, A through F, item 7, A through W. I'll make the motion. Second?
Second.
Thanks.
Mrs. Carey,
Yes.
Mr. Pascal.
Yes.
Mr. Jackson,
Yes.
Mrs. Dion.
Yes.
Mrs. Snyder.
Yes. So at this point in time, I'd like to mention a few things. First of all, on tonight's agenda, we accepted the resignation of Rachel Marcel. So we would like to thank her for all the work she has done with our students. She's going on to become the Director of Social Emotional Learning at Queensberry. Also tonight, we have appointed Sabrina Note. Sabrina is here in the audience with a special guest visitor. And Sabrina is is now a special education teacher at Harmony Hill Elementary School in the behavioral development K-2 classroom. So welcome to our community. We're thrilled to have you. And I'd also like to congratulate Mr. Martinelli on his appointment this evening. We're very excited to welcome him to his new role as Assistant Superintendent. And I look forward to our work together, and I have no doubt that his leadership will help us achieve the mission, vision, and commitments of our district. So congratulations.
Would you like to join us at the table?
You can turn the sign around, so that's not you.
Where's this going, Pete?
Congratulations.
Congratulations.
Thanks.
We're very excited about the dream team we have up
Don't
here.
forget us. Yeah, right.
I'm very excited. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Mom wants to take a picture.
I'm smiling behind the mask. Can I stamp something?
No. You're not allowed to touch the gavel either. All right, are there any questions or comments from members of the board about anything else? No? Audience? Questions, comments, concerns? You can't have them back, Mrs. Kelly?
I would like to officially say, as my role as CPA president, that I'm very sad as an assistant principal, but I'm very happy as the president of the association that the team that we are going to have at the top is finally the dream team. Peggy, we have Dan, we have Stacy, and Aaron Hill rounding it up, and I think we're going to be
Anything else, anyone else?
Can I just ask, what's that important thing when I came up, not because of this, like, the meetings.
Yeah.
So we always met the first and the third, always. So are we considering deviating from that?
Well, that's what the discussion would have to be.
So I would ask the school folks that are here, is that going to be disruptive to an extent? Because we've always had, those have always been the dates. And I would expect that things are planned around those. We asked a lot of our staff to be here and planning ahead. And there's lots of activities that go on in school. So I have the impression that everyone worked around those consistent dates that we've always had. I just would ask if there's any feedback from our staff on changing around.
I think from our end, so first of all, over the past year and a half, we have learned how to be extremely flexible, even more. So for a while, there was a policy about the first and third that changed, so it's no longer a policy. And I think as long as we have the dates in advance, we can work around them. It's more about saying these are the dates. We haven't set up our administrative council meetings, things like that yet. And yes, we can
So
work,
by the next meeting, they're in place. people
we can
will
work,
just-
around it. So. And Scott, did you want to?
I did. I'll speak to Mark's point first. I mean, Matt, Elaine, and I can always make anything, so we'll be here, whatever the date you have. I mean, we're pretty flexible, we're pretty flexible with the dates.
As long as you know.
As long as we have them, as we know, and we can share them with our members too. I also kind of want to reiterate what Deanna said, on behalf of the Readiness Association. I mean, I think Matt and I, and everyone else look forward to working with Dan and Peggy on a lot of the things that we know need to be done in the school district, and so we just look forward to working with you guys. I think it'll be a wonderful collaboration between everyone.
Yes. Anyone else? All right, the dates for our future meetings are August 25th. That one's for sure. In this room, we'll also live stream it. Are not attending the executive session. And can we just have a motion to adjourn the meeting? Second? Thank you.
Mrs. Carey,
Yes.
Mr. Pascal,
Yes.
Mr. Jackson,
Yes.
Mrs. Dion.
Yeah.
Mrs. Snyder.
Thank you for coming, everyone.
Thank
all.
you.
Congratulations.